Captain Elena Vasquez floated in the command center of the research ship Endeavor, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. 3 years into their deep space mission, the crew had grown used to the endless darkness between systems. They were mapping new trade routes for Earth's expanding colonies when everything changed. "Captain, we're picking up something strange," called Lieutenant Torres from the communications station. His voice carried an edge of confusion that made Elena push off from the window and drift toward his position. "What kind of strange?" Elena asked, grabbing a handhold near the comm station. The artificial gravity in this section had been acting up for weeks, leaving them all floating like fish in a bowl. Torres frowned at his screens. "It's a transmission, but not like anything in our databases. The signal is incredibly powerful, broadcasting on multiple frequencies at once. Someone really wants this message to be heard." Elena studied the data scrolling across the screens. The signal showed complex mathematical patterns that seemed to repeat every few minutes. "Any idea who sent it?" "That's the weird part," Torres said, adjusting his headset. "The transmission is encrypted, but the encryption itself is like nothing we've ever seen. It's not human, and it doesn't match any of the alien languages we've encountered in trade negotiations." Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her workstation across the command center. As the ship's xenolinguist, she had spent years studying the few alien species that humanity had made contact with. "Patch it through to my station. Let me take a look." Elena watched as Chen's fingers flew over her keyboard, running the signal. Through various analysis programs, the transmission played through the speakers as a series of complex tones and rhythms that meant nothing to human ears. "This is sophisticated," Chen muttered, pulling up holographic displays of the signals. "Structure. The mathematical base appears to be using prime number sequences, but in combinations I've never seen. Whoever sent this has a completely different way of thinking about mathematics." The ship's AI, a basic model called Area, chimed in through the speakers. "Captain, I am detecting similar transmissions throughout this sector of space. The signal appears to be broadcasting from multiple points simultaneously." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "Multiple points? Like a network?" "More like an emergency broadcast system," Area replied. "The signal strength and pattern suggest this is meant to reach across vast distances very quickly." Chen suddenly sat back from her station, her face pale. "Captain, I think I've found something. The signal contains star charts, detailed maps of this entire arm of the galaxy." "Show me," Elena said, drifting over to Chen's station. The holographic display lit up with a 3-dimensional map of local space. Hundreds of star systems glowed in blue but scattered throughout were areas marked in angry red. Elena's heart sank as she recognized one of the red zones. "That's our solar system," she whispered. "Yes," Chen confirmed, "and look at this." She highlighted another section of the map. "These red areas cover every inhabited system we know about. Every human colony, every alien settlement we've traded with. They're all marked." Torres called out from his station. "Captain Dr. Chen, you need to hear this. I think Aria cracked part of the encryption." The speakers crackled to life with a new sound. Instead of the mathematical tones, they heard something that sounded almost like speech. The words were alien, but Aria began translating in real time. "Warning. All sentient species. Immediate evacuation. The sleepers wake." Elena grabbed a handhold tighter. "Keep going, Aria." The translation continued, halting and uncertain. "Retreat to designated safe zones. Protocol 7 in effect. The devourers rise," Chen gasped. "Devourers? What are devourers?" Aria processed more of the signal. "All inhabited systems must be abandoned. Feeding cycle begins. Evacuation time frame. Unknown measurement of time. All species flee." The command center fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's systems. Elena looked around at her crew. They had 16 people aboard the Endeavor, good people who had signed up for a routine mapping mission. Now they were receiving what sounded like a galaxy-wide evacuation order. "Area, can you translate more of the message?" Elena asked. "Working, Captain. The signal contains extensive technical data about the red zones marked on the star charts. These areas are designated as..." The translation is unclear. "Feeding grounds or consumption zones." Chen pulled up more data on her screens. "Captain, look at this. The signal includes what appear to be escape routes, paths leading away from inhabited space toward the outer rim of the galaxy." Elena studied the escape routes. They all led away from everything humanity had ever known. Away from Earth, away from the colonies, away from the alien civilizations they traded with. "How long would it take to reach these safe zones?" Elena asked. Chen did quick calculations. "At maximum speed? Decades, maybe longer. We're talking about evacuating to the very edge of the galaxy." Torres looked up from his station with worried eyes. "Captain, I'm detecting movement in nearby systems. Long-range sensors are picking up massive energy signatures." "What kind of movement?" Elena asked. "Unknown. The signatures are huge, bigger than anything in our databases, and they're moving toward inhabited systems." Elena felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. Whatever was happening, they were probably the only humans who knew about it. The transmission had been in an alien language using alien mathematics. If not for their xenolinguist and advanced AI, they never would have understood any of it. "Dr. Chen, how certain are you about the translation?" Elena asked. Chen looked at her data again. "The mathematical portions are clear. The star charts are accurate. The designated safe zones are marked precisely. As for the warnings about devourers and feeding cycles..." She shrugged. "The language is alien, but the urgency is universal. Someone is very scared and wants everyone to run away." Arya spoke up. Again, "Captain, I have completed analysis of the technical data included with the transmission. The entities referred to as devourers appear to be large-scale consumers of stellar material and planetary biomass." "They eat stars?" Torres asked in disbelief. "That appears to be accurate, Lieutenant. The data suggests these entities feed on both stellar energy and organic matter on a massive scale." Elena closed her eyes for a moment, trying to process what they were learning. Somewhere out there, things that ate stars were waking up from some kind of sleep. Every advanced civilization in the galaxy was running away as fast as they could, and humanity had apparently never been important enough to be warned. "The signal wasn't meant for us, was it?" Elena said quietly. Chen shook her head. "No. The encryption, the language, the mathematical base, it's all designed for species much more advanced than humanity. We were never supposed to intercept this message, let alone understand it. So we're on our own," Elena concluded. "It appears so, Captain," Arya confirmed. "The transmission contains no reference to human civilization or technology. From the perspective of whoever sent this warning, humanity may not even register as a significant species." Elena looked out at the stars again. Somewhere among those distant lights, ancient things were stirring. Things so terrible that entire civilizations were abandoning everything they had built to flee into the empty darkness at the galaxy's edge. "Torres, set a course for Earth," Elena ordered. "Maximum speed." "Yes, Captain. Estimated arrival time at current maximum velocity is 8 months. 8 months. Elena wondered if Earth would still be there when they arrived. She wondered if any of the human colonies would survive whatever was coming, but she knew they had to try to warn everyone. "Dr. Chen, keep working on that translation. I want to understand everything in that signal. Area, monitor all frequencies for additional transmissions." "Captain," Chen said hesitantly, "what if we can't reach Earth in time? What if whatever's coming gets there first?" Elena stared out at the stars, thinking about the billions of people on Earth who had no idea what was heading toward them. People who were going about their daily lives, completely unaware that something in the darkness considered their entire solar system a feeding ground. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Elena said finally. But we're not going to run. We're going to warn everyone we can, and then we're going to figure out how to fight. Fight? Torres asked. Captain, if entire alien civilizations are fleeing from these things, then maybe they're making a mistake, Elena interrupted. Maybe running isn't the only option. Chen looked at her with concern. Captain, the data suggests these devourers are incredibly powerful. The energy signatures alone are just numbers on a screen until we see them for ourselves, Elena finished. I'm not saying it will be easy. I'm not even saying it's possible. But humanity didn't get this far by running away from every threat. The command center fell quiet again as the crew considered their captain's words. Outside the viewing window, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that something was stirring in the darkness between them. Something hungry. Elena made her decision. They would race toward Earth with their warning. They would tell everyone who would listen about the danger coming from the stars. And if the time came to fight, they would fight. After all, the galaxies. Advanced civilizations had already written humanity off as insignificant. Maybe it was time to prove them wrong. 3 months after intercepting the alien warning, Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of Earth's largest space station, watching something that should have been impossible. Through the reinforced windows, she could see the construction, yards where humanity's greatest engineering projects took shape. But today, they were watching those projects disappear. There goes another one, said Admiral Rebecca Walsh, pointing toward a massive structure that had been under construction for the past 5 years. The alien megastructure, a joint project between humans and the Centauri traders, was systematically dismantling itself. Elena watched through binoculars as robotic systems carefully took apart components that had taken years to build. The aliens were methodical, precise, and clearly in a hurry. Every piece was loaded onto ships that disappeared into space within hours of being packed. Have they responded to any of our communications? Elena asked. Admiral Walsh shook her head. Nothing. They won't answer our calls. They won't explain what they're doing. They just keep packing and leaving. Dr. Sarah Chen joined them at the window, carrying a tablet full of data. It's happening everywhere, she reported. Every alien species we've had contact with is doing the same thing. The Rigel commercial station shut down overnight. The mining operation in the Vega system just vanished, leaving behind empty tunnels. Elena studied the data on Chen's tablet. What about the ruins on Kepler 442b, the archaeological site? Abandoned, Chen confirmed. The automated research stations are still running, but all the alien researchers are gone. They left behind some kind of warning beacon, but it's broadcasting in the same language as the original signal we intercepted. Admiral Walsh frowned. Dr. Chen, your report mentioned energy signatures. What exactly are we looking at? Chen pulled up a star chart on her tablet. Long-range sensors have detected massive objects moving through space. They're huge, Admiral. Larger than anything we've ever seen. How large? Elena asked. The smallest one we've detected is roughly the size of our moon. The largest... Chen paused, checking her numbers. The largest is bigger than Mars. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. And they're heading this way? Not directly, Chen said, but they're moving through this sector of the galaxy. Based on their current course, one of them will reach the outer edge of our solar system in approximately 4 months. Admiral Walsh activated a holographic display showing the solar system. What exactly are these things? Chen overlaid her data onto the display. Based on the energy signatures and the warnings in the alien transmission, we believe they're the devourers mentioned in the message. They appear to be semi-organic constructs that consume stellar material and planetary matter. They eat stars, Elena said flatly. That's the simplified version, yes? Chen confirmed. Our analysis suggests they break down matter at the atomic level and convert it directly into energy. Stars, planets, space stations, anything with significant mass. Admiral Walsh studied the holographic display. And the aliens are running away from these things? Every species we know of. Chen nodded. The evacuation appears to be galaxy-wide. Even civilizations we've never met are fleeing toward the outer rim. Elena walked closer to the window, watching as another alien construction project packed itself away. They're treating this like a natural disaster, something they've dealt with before. The mathematical patterns in the original signals suggest this has happened before, Chen agreed. Possibly many times. The evacuation protocols are well established. Admiral Walsh activated her communication device. This is Admiral Walsh to Earth Command. I need an immediate conference with the Global Defense Council. As the Admiral made her arrangements, Elena continued watching the alien evacuation. The precision and speed of their departure suggested they had practiced this many times. They knew exactly what to do, how long they had, and where they needed to go. Dr. Chen, Elena said quietly, how long do these feeding cycles last? Chen consulted her tablet. The data is unclear, but our best estimate based on the evacuation timelines is anywhere from several decades to several centuries. Centuries, Elena repeated. They're planning to stay away for centuries. It appears so, Chen confirmed. The designated safe zones are far enough from inhabited space that the journey alone would take most species 50 to 100 years. Elena thought about what that meant for humanity. They didn't have the technology for century-long space voyages. They couldn't evacuate entire planets to the edge of the galaxy. And even if they could, they didn't have centuries to wait out whatever was coming. Admiral Walsh finished her communication and rejoined them. The Global Defense Council is convening an emergency session. They want our full report in 6 hours. What are you going to tell them? Elena asked. The truth, Walsh replied. That something is coming that makes entire alien civilizations pack up and run, and that we have no idea how to fight it. Chen's tablet beeped with an incoming data update. Admiral, Captain, you need to see this. Long-range sensors just detected something new. The holographic display updated to show the outer solar system. Beyond Pluto, a red indicator appeared, growing slowly brighter. What is that? Walsh asked. Energy signature consistent with the devourer entities, Chen reported. It just appeared at the edge of our sensor range. Elena studied the display. How big? Chen ran calculations. Approximately the size of our moon, as I mentioned. But Captain, look at this. She highlighted additional data. It's heading directly for Jupiter. The three women stared at the display in silence. Whatever was coming wasn't interested in Earth or the smaller planets. It was heading straight for the solar system's largest source of mass. How long until it reaches Jupiter? Walsh asked. At current velocity, approximately 6 weeks, Chen replied. Admiral Walsh activated her communicator again. This is Admiral Walsh. Cancel the 6-hour delay. The Global Defense Council needs to convene immediately. As alarms began sounding throughout the station, Elena continued watching the alien evacuation outside the window. The last of the Centauri ships was preparing to depart, loaded with components from decades of joint construction projects. They never even tried to warn us, Elena said quietly. Chen looked up from her tablet. What do you mean? The aliens, Elena explained. They've been evacuating for months, but they never told us why. They never suggested we should leave too. Maybe they assumed we couldn't, Chen suggested. Our technology isn't advanced enough for galaxy-wide evacuation. Or maybe they didn't think we were worth saving, Elena said. Admiral Walsh joined them at the window as the last alien ship departed Earth orbit. It doesn't matter what they thought, she said firmly. We're here, and we're not going anywhere. Chen looked at both women with concern. Admiral Captain, based on the data we have, these entities are incredibly powerful. If entire alien civilizations are fleeing, then maybe they're all making the same mistake, Elena interrupted. Maybe, Running away isn't the only option. Captain, Chen said carefully, the energy readings suggest these devourers could consume our entire solar system. Then we need to make sure they don't, Elena replied. Admiral Walsh nodded grimly. Dr. Chen, I want everything we know about these entities sent to every research facility on Earth. If we're going to fight this thing, we need to understand what we're fighting. Chen hesitated. Admiral, with respect, the alien civilizations fleeing have technology far more advanced than ours. If they can't fight these entities, then we'll have to be smarter than they are, Walsh said, or luckier, or more stubborn. Elena smiled grimly at that. I vote for more stubborn. The holographic display updated again, showing the approaching entity's projected path. It would pass through the outer solar system, consume Jupiter's mass, and then likely move on to Saturn before eventually reaching the inner planets. 6 weeks, Elena said, studying the display. 6 weeks to figure out how to stop something that eats planets. The good news, Chen said weakly, is that it doesn't seem to be in any hurry. The devourers appear to feed slowly and methodically. That might be our advantage, Walsh agreed. If it's focused on Jupiter, maybe we can find a way to disrupt its feeding process. Elena thought about the alien ships disappearing into the darkness, carrying their civilizations to safety at the edge of the galaxy. Those species had thousands of years of experience and technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. But they were all running away. Maybe that was their weakness. Maybe after countless feeding cycles, they had forgotten that sometimes the best defense was a good offense. Admiral, Elena said, I volunteer to lead the first reconnaissance mission. Walsh raised an eyebrow. Reconnaissance? We need to see one of these things up close, Elena explained. We need to understand how they work, how they feed, what their weaknesses might be. Captain, that could be a suicide mission, Chen warned. Elena shrugged. Then we'd better make sure it's not a waste of one. Outside the window, the construction yard sat empty for the first time in decades. But deep in those facilities, human engineers were already beginning to work on something new. Something designed not for trade or exploration, but for war. The aliens had fled, taking their advanced technology and thousands of years of experience with them. But they had left behind something they didn't understand. A species too stubborn to run and too proud to die quietly. General Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Defiance, watching Jupiter grow larger on the main screen. 6 weeks had passed since the first devourer entered their solar system, and humanity had spent every moment preparing for something they barely understood. Distance to target? Rodriguez asked. 2 million kilometers and closing, reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the tactical station. The entity is maintaining position near Jupiter's north pole. Rodriguez studied the tactical display. The devourer appeared as a massive, irregularly shaped object roughly the size of Earth's moon. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like living tissue, but scans revealed a complex mixture of organic and mechanical components. Dr. Chen, what's our current understanding of how this thing feeds? Rodriguez asked. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as the fleet's chief science officer, consulted her tablets. The entity extends what we can only describe as feeding tendrils into Jupiter's atmosphere. These tendrils break down matter at the molecular level and transport the energy back to the main body. How much has it consumed so far? Rodriguez asked. Approximately 0.3% of Jupiter's total mass, Chen replied. At this rate, it would take several years to consume the entire planet. Rodriguez nodded grimly. The devourer's slow feeding speed had given humanity time to prepare, but it also meant the entity would be in their solar system for years if they couldn't stop it. Status report on the fleet, Rodriguez ordered. Hayes consulted his displays. 15 ships equipped with experimental plasma cannons, 8 ships carrying the new gravitational disruptor missiles, and 12 ships loaded with what engineering is calling the special package. The special package had been humanity's first attempt at creative problem-solving. If the devourers consumed matter for energy, perhaps they could be given something that would disagree with them. Teams of scientists had worked around the clock to create isotopically modified materials that would theoretically disrupt the entity's feeding process. All ships report ready for engagement, Hayes continued. Rodriguez took a deep breath. 3. Previous alien species had attempted to fight the devourers according to the historical records they had managed to decode. All 3 had been completely destroyed. But humanity had one advantage those species might not have had. They were considered too primitive to be worth the devourer's full attention. "Open a channel to all ships," Rodriguez ordered. "Channel open, sir. This is General Rodriguez to all ships. In 10 minutes, we will engage an entity that has caused entire civilizations to flee our galaxy. We are about to attempt something that every advanced species has deemed impossible." He paused, looking around the bridge at his crew. "We're going to pick a fight with something that eats planets for breakfast." Nervous laughter echoed through the comm system from the other ships. "But here's the thing," Rodriguez continued. "This entity has spent thousands of years chasing advanced civilizations that always run away. It's probably never faced anyone stupid enough to fight back. Let's see how it handles a species too stubborn to know when we're beaten." "Sir," Chen interrupted, "I'm detecting changes in the entity's feeding pattern. It appears to be responding to our approach." Rodriguez looked at the main screen. The devourer's feeding tendrils were withdrawing from Jupiter's atmosphere, and the entity was beginning to turn toward the approaching human fleet. "It's noticed us," Hayes reported. "Energy readings are increasing across all spectrums." "Good," Rodriguez said. "All ships implement attack pattern Delta. Plasma cannon ships target the feeding appendages. Gravitational disruptor teams aim for what looks like the main body. Special package ships wait for my signal." The human fleet spread out in a complex formation designed to confuse targeting systems. The ships were tiny compared to the devourer, but they moved with the coordinated precision of Earth's military doctrine. "Plasma cannons, fire!" Rodriguez ordered. Brilliant streams of superheated plasma lanced out from 15 ships, striking the devourer's surface. The entity's reaction was immediate and violent. Energy discharges erupted from its surface, and massive tentacle-like appendages began reaching toward the human ships. "Evasive maneuvers!" Rodriguez called out. "Gravitational disruptor teams, fire!" 8 ships launched their experimental missiles. The weapons use concentrated gravitational fields to disrupt the space-time around their targets. When they struck the devourer, sections of its surface began to warp and buckle. "We're getting a reaction," Chen reported excitedly. "The gravitational disruptors are interfering with its structural integrity, but the devourer was far from helpless. One of its appendages caught the cruiser Yamato, and Rodriguez watched in horror as the ship was drawn into the entity's surface. Within seconds, there was nothing left but dissipated energy. "The Yamato is gone," Hayes reported grimly. "All ships, maintain distance," Rodriguez ordered. "Do not let those appendages touch you." The battle continued for 20 minutes. Human ships darted in and out, firing their weapons and retreating before the devourer could retaliate. They managed to damage several of the entity's feeding systems, but their weapons seemed to have little lasting effect. "Sir," Chen called out, "I'm detecting something unusual. The plasma cannon attacks aren't penetrating the entity's surface, but they're causing localized energy fluctuations." Rodriguez studied the tactical display. "What kind of fluctuations?" "It's like the entity's surface is trying to absorb the plasma energy, but the process is inefficient. There's a lot of waste heat being generated." An idea began to form in Rodriguez's mind. "Dr. Chen, what if we're thinking about this wrong? What if we can't damage this thing, but we can give it indigestion?" Chen looked at him with confusion. "I don't understand." "The special package," Rodriguez explained. "We've been thinking about it as poison, but what if we think about it as really bad food? Something that takes more energy to digest than it provides." Chen's eyes widened as she understood. Overload its feeding systems. Make it work harder to process the materials than the energy it gains from them. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. All ships with special packages prepare for synchronized deployment. We're going to force feed this thing until it chokes. The 12 ships carrying the isotopically modified materials moved into position. Each ship carried tons of specially prepared matter designed to be as difficult as possible for the devourer to process. On my mark, Rodriguez announced. 3, 2, 1, deploy! All 12 ships launched their payloads simultaneously. The modified materials spread out in a cloud around the devourer, and the entity's feeding tendrils automatically began consuming them. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then Chen's instruments began detecting energy fluctuations throughout the devourer's structure. It's working, Chen reported. The entity is trying to process the modified materials, but the energy cost is enormous. Its overall efficiency is dropping rapidly. The devourer's movements became more erratic. Its feeding tendrils began to withdraw, and the energy discharges from its surface became more frequent but less controlled. It's having trouble, Hayes observed. Whatever we fed it, it doesn't like the taste. But Rodriguez knew they weren't done yet. The entity was wounded, but it was still massive and dangerous. All ships, continue the attack. Keep feeding it modified materials and hitting it with gravitational disruptors. The battle raged for another hour. More human ships were lost, but the devourer's condition continued to deteriorate. Its movements became sluggish, and several of its major appendages stopped functioning entirely. Finally, Chen made the announcement Rodriguez had been hoping for. Sir, the entity is beginning to break apart. The modified materials have disrupted its internal energy processes. It's consuming itself from the inside. Rodriguez watched on. The main screen as the massive devourer began to collapse. Sections of its surface broke away and dissolved into energy. Within minutes, the entity that had terrified entire civilizations was gone, leaving behind only scattered debris and dissipating radiation. All ships, report status, Rodriguez ordered. The damage reports came in. 7 ships destroyed, 12 others badly damaged. But they had won. They had actually destroyed a devourer. Dr. Chen, are you detecting any other entities in the system? Rodriguez asked. Chen checked her instruments. No, sir. This appears to have been a solitary entity. Rodriguez allowed himself a moment of satisfaction, but he knew this was just the beginning. Intelligence reports suggested there were dozens of devourers moving through this sector of the galaxy. All ships, return to Earth for repairs and resupply, Rodriguez ordered. We have work to do. As the human fleet began its journey back to Earth, Rodriguez thought about the alien civilizations that had fled to the galaxy's edge. They had thousands of years of experience and technology far beyond anything humanity possessed. But they had also become set in their ways, convinced that running was the only option. Maybe that was why they had never defeated the devourers. They had become so focused on survival that they had forgotten how to fight. Humanity didn't have that problem. They were too new to the galaxy to know what was impossible, and apparently too stubborn to care. Sir, Chen said quietly, our victory here will be detected by monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Other species will know that someone actually fought a devourer and won. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Good. Maybe it's time the galaxy learned that humans don't run from fights. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. And for the first time in thousands of years, the devourers were about to face an enemy that refused to flee. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the modified destroyer Persistence, studying the holographic map of the Kepler 442 system. 6 months had passed since humanity's first victory against a devourer, and the war had spread across 3 star systems. What they had learned was both encouraging and terrifying. Status report on the Kepler defense grid? Elena asked. Commander Jackson consulted his tablets. The alien automated systems are still active, but they won't respond to our commands. According to Dr. Chen's team, the control interface requires a neural pattern that's fundamentally different from human brain structure. Elena nodded grimly. The ancient alien defense grid surrounding Kepler 442b was exactly what humanity needed to turn the tide of the war. The massive orbital weapons platforms had been built by a species that had vanished millions of years ago, but their automated systems still functioned perfectly. Unfortunately, they had been designed to only accept commands from their long-dead creators. "What about the volunteer program?" Elena asked. Commander Jackson's expression darkened. 17 volunteers so far. All of them experienced severe neural trauma when attempting to interface with the alien systems. Dr. Patterson is still in intensive care from yesterday's attempt. Elena felt a weight in her stomach. They had identified the key to stopping the devourer invasion, but using it was killing the people who tried. The alien neural interface required thought patterns that human brains simply couldn't produce safely. "Dr. Chen, any progress on modifying the interface?" Elena asked. Dr. Sarah Chen looked up from her workstation, exhaustion clear on her face. "I've been working with the team around the clock, Captain. The problem is fundamental. The alien species that built this system thought in mathematical concepts that human brains interpret as physical pain. Extended exposure causes permanent brain damage." "How extended are we talking about?" Elena asked. "Based on our analysis, successfully activating the defense grid would require approximately 12 minutes of sustained interface contact," Chen replied. "Our longest successful connection so far has been 90 seconds before the volunteer had to disconnect due to neural stress." Elena studied the tactical display showing the current devourer positions. 3 entities were approaching. The Kepler system, drawn by the large star and multiple planets. If they reached the system, they would consume everything, including the irreplaceable defense grid. "Captain," Jackson said, "perhaps we should consider alternative strategies. The gravitational disruption tactics have been effective in smaller engagements." Elena shook her head. "Jackson, we've faced single devourers in isolated systems. The intelligence reports show at least 24 entities moving through this sector. If we can't activate that defense grid, we'll be fighting them one at a time, until they overwhelm us." Chen approached Elena with a tablet full of new data. "Captain, I may have found something. The alien interface system includes what appears to be a pain suppression protocol. If I can modify it for human neural patterns—" "How dangerous would that be?" Elena asked. "Unknown," Chen admitted. "The modifications would essentially trick the human brain into interpreting the alien mathematical concepts as harmless sensations, rather than pain signals. But I have no idea what the long-term effects might be." Elena considered the options. They could retreat and continue fighting individual devourers across the galaxy, always staying one step ahead of the main swarm. Or they could take a massive risk to gain access to weapons that might actually turn the tide. "How long would you need to implement the modifications?" Elena asked. 6 hours, maybe 8, Chen replied. "Do it," Elena decided. "And prepare the interface chamber for another attempt." "Captain," Jackson protested, if this goes wrong, we lose one person instead of losing entire star systems," Elena interrupted. "Besides, I'm not ordering anyone to do this." Jackson looked at her with concern. "Captain, you're not thinking of attempting the interface yourself." "I'm the senior officer present," Elena replied. "If anyone's going to take this risk, it should be me." Chen shook her head. "Captain, with respect, neural interface requires specific training. You'd need weeks of preparation." "Then find me someone who's already trained and willing to volunteer," Elena said. 8 hours later, Elena stood outside the interface chamber watching through reinforced glass as Lieutenant Martinez prepared for the most dangerous mission of his career. Martinez had been one of the first volunteers for the Neural Interface program and had successfully maintained connection longer than anyone else. "All systems ready," Chen reported from the control station. "The pain suppression modifications are active and all monitoring equipment is online." Elena activated the comm system. "Martinez, how are you feeling?" "Ready as I'll ever be, Captain," Martinez replied, though Elena could hear the tension in his voice. "Let's light this thing up." Chen began the activation sequence. Elena watched as Martinez placed his hands on the alien interface nodes, and the chamber filled with strange, shifting lights. "Neural connection established," Chen reported. "Pain suppression protocols are active. Martinez, how are you feeling?" "Strange," Martinez replied. "I can feel the alien systems, but instead of pain, it's like hearing music made of mathematics." Elena held her breath as the minutes ticked by. 2 minutes, then 5, then 10. Martinez had already exceeded the longest previous connection by several times. 11 minutes, Chen announced. "Defense grid systems are coming online throughout the system." On the tactical display, Elena watched as dozens of orbital weapons platforms that had been dormant for millions of years began powering up. Energy readings spiked as ancient technologies reactivated. 12 minutes, Chen called out. "Full system activation achieved. Martinez, you can disconnect now." But Martinez didn't respond. Elena could see him through the glass, still connected. To the alien interface, his face serene but unresponsive. "Martinez, disconnect now," Elena ordered. "I'm trying," Chen said, working frantically at her controls. "The alien system isn't releasing him. It's like it's found something it's been looking for." Elena watched in growing alarm as Martinez's vital signs began fluctuating wildly. "Chen, shut it down!" "I can't," Chen replied. "The alien system has assumed full control. It's overriding all our safety protocols." Then, suddenly, Martinez spoke, but his voice carried strange harmonics, as if multiple people were speaking at once. "Defense grid fully operational. Target acquisition systems active. Threat assessment. Multiple Class Alpha entities approaching. Initiating engagement protocols." Elena stared as Martinez turned to look at her through the glass. His eyes were completely black, filled with swirling patterns of light. "The builder's knowledge flows through the interface," Martinez said in that strange, harmonized voice. "The weapon systems await targeting commands." "Martinez, are you still in there?" Elena asked. "Present and functional," Martinez replied. "The alien systems have integrated with human neural patterns. Full defense grid control is now possible." Chen checked her readings. "Captain, his brain activity is off the charts, but it's stable. Somehow the alien system has found a way to merge with human consciousness." Elena made a command decision. "Martinez, can you target the approaching devourers?" "Affirmative. 3 Class Alpha entities detected. Distance, 48 million kilometers and closing. Weapons systems charging." The tactical display updated to show the approaching devourers, now highlighted with targeting indicators. Around the system, the ancient weapons platforms began orienting toward the threats. "Engagement authorized," Elena ordered. "Initiating. Attack sequence," Martinez replied. Elena watched as beams of energy, unlike anything humanity had ever produced, lanced out from the orbital platforms. The weapons fired continuously for several minutes, their energy signatures so powerful that they registered on sensors throughout the system. When the firing stopped, the tactical display showed empty space where the 3 devourers had been. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of the massive space station Unity, watching the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history prepare for battle. 2 years had passed since humanity's first victory against the devourers, and everything had changed. "Status report from all sectors?" Elena asked. Captain Torres, now serving as fleet coordinator, consulted his displays. "Human forces, 200 ships equipped with hybrid alien-human technology. Centauri Confederation, 50 heavy cruisers with modified plasma arrays. Rigel Defense Fleet, 30 ships with experimental gravitational weapons, vegan scientific core, 12 ships carrying advanced sensor packages. Elena nodded, still amazed at how quickly everything had changed. After word of humanity's victories against the devourers spread throughout the galaxy, species that had been fleeing toward the rim began returning, first as observers, then as tentative allies, and finally, as full partners in what had become a galaxy-wide war. "What about the neural interface operators?" Elena asked. Dr. Sarah Chen, now director of the Hybrid Consciousness Project, approached with her daily report. 43 volunteers currently integrated with alien defense systems throughout the galaxy. Each station can coordinate with the eye, others through the neural network. Lieutenant Martinez remains the primary node. Elena thought about Martinez and the other volunteers who had sacrificed their purely human consciousness to operate alien weapon systems. They were still human, but also something more. Their sacrifice had given the Alliance access to defense networks across the galaxy. "Incoming transmission from long-range sensors," Torres announced. "The final devourer concentration has been located." The main display activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galactic core. At the center, where the supermassive black hole anchored the galaxy's rotation, a massive cluster of red indicators showed the positions of the remaining devourers. "How many?" Elena asked. Chen checked her data. 17 entities, all clustered around the galactic core. Intelligence suggests they're attempting to feed directly on the black hole's energy output. Elena studied the tactical display. The remaining devourers represented the largest concentration they had encountered. If the entities succeeded in feeding on the galactic core, they would become exponentially more powerful. "Dr. Chen, what happens if they successfully feed on a black hole?" Elena asked. Chen consulted her calculations. "Based on our understanding of their feeding mechanisms, they would gain enough energy to reproduce rapidly. Instead of dozens of entities, we could be facing thousands within a matter of months." Elena felt the weight of the moment. This was it. The final battle that would determine whether the galaxy remained free or became food for ancient predators. "All fleet commanders, this is Admiral Vasquez," Elena announced over the comm system. "We have located the final devourer concentration at the galactic core. This is our chance to end this war permanently." The response came from dozens of species speaking in different languages, but the sentiment was universal. They were ready to fight. "Fleet status report," Elena ordered. Torres coordinated with the various species representatives. "All ships, report ready for hyperspace jump. Estimated travel time to the galactic core, 6 hours." Elena thought about the journey ahead. The galactic core was one of the most dangerous regions of space, filled with radiation, gravitational anomalies, and spatial distortions that could tear apart unprotected ships. "Dr. Chen, status of the neural network?" Elena asked. "All stations report optimal connection," Chen replied. "Martinez and his team can coordinate defense grid activations throughout the engagement zone." Elena took a deep breath. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump. Destination, galactic core." 6 hours later, the Alliance fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the galactic core region. Elena stared at the main screen in awe. The view showed a chaotic landscape of stellar phenomena, unlike anything in the outer galaxy. Massive stars burned with impossible brightness, while streams of superheated gas spiraled into the central black hole, and there, feeding on the energy streams, were the 17 remaining devourers. "Tactical analysis," Elena ordered. Chen studied her readouts. "The entities are significantly larger than any we've encountered before. The smallest is roughly the size of Earth, the largest comparable to Jupiter. They appear to have been feeding on high-energy sources for an extended period." Elena watched as the devourers moved through the energy streams around the black hole with graceful, predatory movements. These weren't the mindless consumers they had fought before. These were the alpha predators, the ones that had survived countless feeding cycles. All ships, implement Battle Plan Omega, Elena ordered. Human ships with poison payloads, prepare for synchronized deployment. Allied ships, target the entity's feeding appendages. Neural interface operators, activate all available defense. Grids. The Alliance fleet spread out in a complex formation designed to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Elena watched as ships from dozens of different species moved with coordinated precision, their various technologies working together in ways that should have been impossible. "Martinez, are you ready?" Elena asked over the neural interface comm. "Ready, Admiral," Martinez replied, his voice carrying the harmonic overtones that had become familiar. "Defense grids throughout the core region are coming online. We have weapons platforms the original builders never intended for this environment, but they'll work." "Initiate attack," Elena ordered. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Alliance ships darted between energy streams and gravitational anomalies, firing weapons that combined the technology of dozens of species. The modified poison payloads that had worked against individual devourers were deployed on a massive scale, forcing the entities to expend enormous amounts of energy trying to process the deliberately difficult materials. But the core devourers were far more powerful than their smaller cousins. They retaliated with energy weapons that could vaporize entire ships, and their massive appendages crushed Alliance vessels that ventured too close. "We're losing ships faster than we can replace them," Torres reported grimly. "The entities are too powerful in this environment." Elena watched as another Allied cruiser disappeared in a burst of energy. They were fighting the final battle against enemies that had fed on the galaxy's core for centuries, growing stronger with each feeding. "Cycle, Martinez, can you overload the defense grid weapons?" Elena asked. "Negative, Admiral," Martinez replied. "The power levels are already at maximum safe parameters." Elena thought about their options. They could retreat and try to contain the devourers in the core region, but that would only buy time. Eventually, the entities would finish feeding and spread out across the galaxy again. "Dr. Chen, what would happen if we poisoned the black hole's energy output?" Elena asked. Chen looked at her in shock. "Admiral, that's impossible. The energy levels involved—" "Not impossible," Elena corrected. "Just dangerous. What would happen?" Chen ran quick calculations. "If we could introduce sufficient amounts of our modified materials into the black hole's accretion disk, the energy output would become toxic to the devourers. But the amount of material required would be enormous." Elena studied the tactical display. "How enormous?" "We would need to sacrifice approximately half our fleet," Chen replied quietly. "The ships would have to carry the materials directly into the accretion disk and detonate them there." Elena felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders. She was being asked to order hundreds of ships and thousands of crew members to commit suicide. "All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez," Elena announced. "I'm about to ask for volunteers for a mission that will not have survivors." The response was immediate. Ship after ship reported their willingness to sacrifice themselves for the mission. Humans, Centauri, Rigelians, vegans, species that had been enemies or strangers just years before were now volunteering to die together. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "Selected ships, load all remaining modified materials and prepare for suicide runs into the accretion disk." Elena watched as half the Alliance fleet formed up for their final mission. These weren't just humans anymore. They were representatives of dozens of species who had learned to work together in the face of extinction. "Good luck," Elena whispered as the volunteer ships began their approach to the black hole. The next few minutes were the longest of Elena's life. She watched as ship after ship plunged into the swirling energy around the black hole, detonating, their modified payloads in precisely calculated positions. "Energy readings from the accretion disk are changing," Chen reported. "The toxic materials are being incorporated into the energy output." Elena watched as the devourer's feeding suddenly became chaotic. The entities that had been gracefully consuming energy began convulsing as the poisoned output overwhelmed their systems. "It's working," Torres announced. "The entities are losing cohesion." One by one, the massive devourers began to break apart. The toxic energy they were trying to consume was destroying them from the inside, just as the modified materials had done to their smaller cousins. When the last entity dissolved into scattered energy, Elena felt a mixture of triumph and sorrow. They had won, but at enormous cost. "All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez," Elena announced. "The threat has been eliminated. Begin recovery operations." As the surviving ships began rescue operations and damage assessment, Elena thought about what they had accomplished. A species that the galaxy had considered insignificant had led a coalition that defeated the most ancient threat in known space. "Incoming transmission," Torres announced. "It's on all frequencies, being broadcast throughout the galaxy." Elena listened as Martinez's voice, speaking through the neural interface network, addressed the entire galaxy. "To all sentient species, the devourer threat has been permanently eliminated. The galaxy is safe to return to normal operations. This message is brought to you courtesy of the Human Alliance and our partners, the species that was too stubborn to run." Elena smiled as responses began pouring in from throughout the galaxy. Species that had fled to the Rim were sending messages of gratitude and requests to establish diplomatic relations. Others were asking how humanity had accomplished the impossible. "What do we tell them?" Torres asked. Elena thought about the long journey from that first intercepted warning to this moment of victory. "We tell them the truth. When everyone else gave up and ran away, we stayed and fought, because sometimes the best way to survive is to refuse to be a victim." As the Alliance fleet began its journey back to inhabited space, Elena knew that humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. They were no longer the insignificant species that nobody bothered to warn about danger. They were the species that had saved everyone. And throughout the galaxy, a new signal was being broadcast. Not a warning to flee, but an invitation to return home. The dangerous signal that had never been meant for humans had led to something beautiful. A galaxy learning to stand together against the darkness. The war was over. The galaxy was free. And humanity had proven that sometimes being too stubborn to give up was exactly what the universe needed.